You believe that knowledge saves you from error. You read, collect, and repeat. The more you know, the more you feel protected from confusion. But Al-Ghazali questioned this comfort. He asked whether knowledge truly removes ignorance or whether it often deepens it. He said ignorance is not the absence of facts, but the illusion of certainty. The one who knows falsely is farther from truth than the one who admits not knowing. To know wrongly is to close the door to learning. Real wisdom, he said, begins when the mind recognizes its own limits. You start to see that ignorance may not oppose wisdom. It may prepare the ground for it. If wisdom grows from ignorance, what kind of knowing must dissolve before understanding begins? In the 11th century, Al-Ghazali was known as one of the greatest scholars of his time. He mastered theology, philosophy, and law, earning prestige in the intellectual circles of Baghdad. His mind could prove anything it desired. Yet, beneath his confidence, something began to fracture. Every argument he made left a trace of uncertainty. Reason could justify belief, but it could not make belief real. What he called knowledge no longer satisfied the heart. In the height of his success, he saw his own ignorance, an ignorance born not of emptiness, but of self-assurance. His search for certainty began there. Al-Ghazali described that turning point as an inner collapse. The foundations of his knowledge began to shake. Logic, experience, and authority all failed to provide what he called yaqin, true certainty. You know this state. You feel sure of your conclusions until one question unsettles them. The more you defend your beliefs, the more fragile they appear. The problem is not lack of knowledge, but confidence without foundation. Knowledge can hide ignorance by giving it structure. To know becomes a defense against the fear of not knowing. Al-Ghazali realized that the mind's security was the soul's greatest obstacle. What if certainty itself blinds you to truth? You notice how easily knowledge becomes display. You learn to appear informed, to sound precise, to correct others. Knowledge becomes a form of power. Al-Ghazali warned that such knowledge hardens the self. It becomes a wall between understanding and humility. You can speak about the truth without touching it. You can explain love without ever loving. You can define God without remembering that you do not know Him. The wish to appear wise becomes the deepest ignorance. For him, learning was not performance, but purification. To admit ignorance was not failure, it was honesty. What if the first step toward truth is to stop proving that you already have it? For Al-Ghazali, the worth of knowledge depended on its intention. Knowledge pursued for authority or praise was imitation, not truth. Knowledge pursued for transformation was light in the heart. He said the aim of learning is not to increase information, but to purify the self. When knowledge serves pride, it deceives. When it serves sincerity, it reveals. You begin to see that the real problem is not ignorance itself, but the motive that hides within knowing. When you learn to appear complete, you cannot be transformed. When you learn to understand, even ignorance becomes a teacher. What do you really seek when you seek to know? You have met minds filled with answers, but empty of understanding. They speak of certainty, yet their certainty has no depth. Al-Ghazali said the most dangerous ignorance is to believe what you already see. The intellect, he wrote, can construct entire worlds of argument that lead nowhere. False knowledge is not darkness, it is distraction. You realize that what blinds is not what you lack, but what you cling to. Every fixed opinion becomes a veil. When every question already carries an answer, learning dies. Perhaps knowledge must first collapse before wisdom can breathe. What if blindness comes not from ignorance, but from knowing too soon? There is an ignorance that frees. It is not confusion, but openness, the quiet admission that the mind cannot contain truth. Al-Ghazali called this humility before the real. It is the moment when thought surrenders its claim to mastery. In that surrender, the intellect becomes clear. The one who admits not knowing stops pretending to control meaning and begins to perceive it. Ignorance turns from obstacle to doorway. You see that "I do not know" is not emptiness, but readiness. It is not the end of knowledge, but its renewal. Could it be that ignorance, rightly seen, is the mind's first act of sincerity? Al-Ghazali's crisis led him away from the world of debate. He withdrew from public teaching to search for direct experience of truth. He came to see that knowledge is not confirmed in words, but in being. The intellect discovers form, but the heart recognizes reality. When pride dissolves, understanding becomes participation, not argument. For you, this means that wisdom is not added, it is uncovered. It appears when you no longer seek to own it. The mind learns its limits, and the heart begins to see through them. When the heart admits ignorance, knowledge becomes living. Can thought itself bow before what it cannot grasp? When Al-Ghazali returned to teaching years later, his view of knowledge had changed. He no longer saw it as possession, but as trust. Knowledge, he said, belongs to God. The scholar is only a mirror that reflects it for a moment. The purpose of knowledge is not argument, but purification. The learned man who has not transformed himself remains ignorant, no matter how vast his understanding. You begin to recognize that real knowledge is not in the mind, but in the quality of awareness itself. Wisdom is not accumulation, it is alignment. What matters is not what you know, but what your knowledge serves. You see now that ignorance and wisdom are not opposites. They are stages of the same movement, the mind's awakening to its limits and the soul's recognition of what lies beyond them. Al-Ghazali's secret way was to see ignorance not as failure, but as invitation. The one who knows he does not know stands closer to truth than the one who mistakes opinion for certainty. To know that you do not know, this is the root of all clarity. The search ends not in answers, but in understanding that needs none. You stop trying to secure knowledge and begin to live from awareness itself. What remains is simplicity, not knowing as absence, but as the beginning of true wisdom. The journey begins with the assumption that ignorance is the enemy of knowledge. Through Al-Ghazali's reflection, that belief dissolves. Intellectual confidence collapses into humility. False knowledge exposes its own emptiness. The viewer follows the path from pride to sincerity, from mental defense to inner clarity. Ignorance becomes recognized as awareness of limitation, the soil from which wisdom grows. Knowledge purified of ego turns into insight. Ignorance accepted becomes understanding. The final stillness reveals no opposition at all. Ignorance and wisdom are two aspects of the same truth. One conceals, the other reveals, but both lead to the same realization of seeing rightly.